Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. Hey, back again with more questions. So, been talking to my buddy Ian over at 1030 Barrels. If you guys haven't checked out 1030 Barrels, check them out. They're a lot like Bad Motivators, set up just slightly differently, and they're in a smaller format. So they're basically an 850 milliliter format. So by the time you account for your angel share, etc., you're going to end up with about a bottle out of it. But what a great way to play around with more expensive alcohols that you don't produce as much of, something like absinthe or something like that, or a high-end fruit brandy that's got no sugar chaptalization added to it or anything of that nature, or even just for bench tests to see if you want to do a bigger batch in the future, right? So definitely check out 1030 Barrels. I can vouch for them. They're holding up just as well as the Bad Mo's are. I'm putting them through absolute hell right now in a greenhouse situation, and they're holding up just beautifully. But the reason I'm here with this video today, and I won't be able to get all of his questions into this one video, which is great because it means I get more content out of these questions. Ian had mentioned that he had a bunch of questions for me, right? And so I told him, I said, hey, send them along, man. I'm glad to answer them. So he sent me an email that's literally labeled, "Too many questions." So we're going to see if we can blast through a couple of these. So, here are a number of random questions I've thought about over the past few weeks. So the first one is about some distillation literature. I'll come back to that one because I have to get into my library and actually look through what I have from pre-1900. But there's a number of manuals and guides out there. Harrison Hall's The Distiller, The Practical Distiller, etc., etc. There's a ton of them, and I've got boxes full of them, man. So same question, but modern day literature. So obviously I'm going to plug my two books from the Alchemist Cabinet. So we have the Alchemist Cabinet Volume 1 Philosophy, and then the second book, which I can't remember the name of because I'm not very good at self-promotion. So book number 1 basically covers the early days of my distillation career at home into the legal distilling industry. It gets into some methodology, gives you a lot of formulas for beer brewing, gives you a lot of formulas for figuring out your malt efficiency, gives you formulas for chaptalization, gives a little bit of biographical information about me, a few recipes, etc. that are pretty simple. And then book number 2 is much more advanced, gives a little bit of the history of distilling here in southern Indiana, also gives a lot of botanical recipes, some orange brandy recipes, some cinnamon eau de vie recipes, and is much more targeted towards people who are more on the advanced side. Book number 3 is coming. I'm working on that now. It's going to be a little while out, but it is coming. My goal is to release one of those every couple of years. Every time I expand my knowledge and sort of get through one more chapter in my distillation career, I want to expand your knowledge and get through another chapter. As far as other modern day literature, Hubert Robin has got some great books. He's got a great book on craft method brandy and a great book on wood management. Matthew Strickland's got a great book on wood management in particular. The Amphora Society, if you guys haven't heard of them, they had a great series of books that I think you could buy actually as a package, including one that had some fantastic recipes going back to the 1600s in it, that I very highly recommend. From there, on the modern side, not a ton. There's stuff out there for sure, but they tend to get too technical jargon on me, or they go the opposite direction and they go too like backwoods, moonshine, hillbilly, tongue-in-cheek sort of thing, right? And I'm guilty of that sometimes too on both sides, but I try to strike a nice balance between the two of them. So I'll do some more thinking on that and see if I can come up with some other names for you. So let's see. When running a double pot still run, what proof do you stop the run at for stripping? So when I'm running a double pot still run, ideally what I'm doing is I'm going to throw out the first couple gallons. Now this is on a 1,200 gallon stripping still. So for a smaller still, a couple shots is all you need to do. It's not 4 shots. It's literally demisting the condenser. So all those oils that were left over from your previous run from the tails are still in your condenser. I'll pull a couple shots of that off and throw it out. Typically our stripping runs, whether at home or at work, between 90 and 110 is where they're going to start, and my goal is to collect every drop of alcohol that I possibly can that is worth having off of that system before I shut it down. So I will go from wherever the proof starts at all the way down to 20 proof. I always go down to 20 proof. I want those high boiling congeners to come across. They are very worthwhile for my time, and especially for sweet water. When I do pump them out into the doubling still, I try to make sure that I pump from underneath the liquid level on top and let those oils that are on top not get pulled in. Those are going to go down the drain just like the shots I talked about a little bit earlier. So what proof what proof do I stop collecting tails during a spirit run? So it kind of depends. Almost always 20 proof. Well, always 20 proof, period. Because I rerun my tails every single time I run the doubling still with the same product in it, because most of your consistency and flavor in pot still distillation is in your tails. And even though those tails don't taste good or smell good, once they are rectified, they break down further with heat, you get more esterification, etc. And so you get positive flavors. There's a big difference between a run without tails and a run with tails, and especially if you're going to go into a barrel, you want those tails in there. So some products I'll stop at 20. Some I'll dive down into what's called the sweet water, and this is basically, again, the essential oil of the raw material that you started with. So I'll take those down to 15, sometimes 10. It depends on what it is. If I feel like I need it or I don't need it, if I feel like I need to make up for something or another by adding that to the proofing water before it goes into the barrel, or even fortifying that with a little bit of alcohol, putting in a barrel and aging it alongside the existing product, and then using that for proofing water afterwards. So do you collect sweet water from spirit runs, and if so, is it best used for proofing the barrel strength or for bottling? I kind of just touched on that a little bit. So for me, it can go either way. Typically, I'm going to actually age the sweet water after I fortify it so it doesn't go bad on me, and then that's going to be used to proof everything down for bottling most of the time. Not always, but most of the time. So what is my preferred ABV for whiskey wash? So kind of depends. So rye whiskeys, we obviously go almost died, sorry. Rye whiskeys, we obviously about did it again. We obviously go a little bit thinner because they get thick and gloopy. So we hit 1055 on those most often. So can't get my calculator because it's on my phone, dumbass. Anyways, roughly you're looking at, and then for 4 grains or wheated and things like that, we'll go 1075. So you're roughly looking at 7 to 10.5% roughly is kind of my preferred ABV range in general. Enough alcohol that it's worthwhile to distill, but not so much alcohol that you get very hot product. So do you ferment your wash dry, or do you end at a specific gravity bricks for residue sugars during distillation? Kind of just depends. So my preference almost always is to leave a little bit behind. So if I'm at a 1075, I don't mind to have a like 1.005. I don't mind those residual sugars hanging out, or even having unfermentable sugars in general, because I get some aromatic precursors that come across during the distillation. No, the sugar itself doesn't come across, but those aromatics do certainly come across in a very interesting and unique way. Now, in a commercial setting, obviously you want to get as much yield as what you can. Now, if I'm just converting with distiller's malt and I'm specifically trying to leave some stuff behind, there are products I do that with. Otherwise, sometimes, like we have a chocolate malt whiskey, it's 90% corn, 10% chocolate malt. Can't do that without using exogenous enzymes, right? And so usually with the exogenous enzymes, I'll hit right at 1.000. I try to not use enzymes at 100% efficiency. I pull them back to about 90-95% efficiency. So I rarely go under that 1.000 mark, because I'm not trying to convert things that God never intended to be converted, as the way that I see it. So what part of the commercial distillation process is the largest pain in the ass, and why is it cleaning the still or checking valves? Valves are important for sure. Everyone who's ever worked for me will tell you that, and I've seen some bad mistakes with people forgetting closed valves. I saw one gentleman at Copper and Kings dump several $1,000s worth of brandy low wines right out on the floor. I saw at least 2 or 3 times in my life I've seen somebody put an entire fermenter, well, half a fermenter down the drain because they forgot to close the drain on the fermenter when they went from the cooker over to the fermenter. That stuff's really not that pain in the ass. The process stuff and the job stuff, It's not that bad. It's more the social commitment, right? The being on multiple podcasts all the time thing, the having to go do tastings, go to stores, go pitch product, go do festivals. I like people. I love meeting you folks out there for sure. I like talking to people. I don't like being gone from home all the time. I don't do nearly as much of it as I used to, and I never will do nearly as much of it as I used to. I used to do everything all the time. I was always at a festival, always at a tasting, always pitching product, never had any time. I don't want to do that. That's not what I got into this for. I'm not in this for fame and fortune. And to be quite honest with you, in the bourbon world, there's a lot of pretentious assholes. Not just on the producer side, but even on the customer side. A lot of people are in this game just to be seen. And listen, if you just want a picture with me for that reason, I got nothing to share with you. We may not have anything in common other than the fact that you like my whiskey and I make my whiskey. For me, that's the hard stuff. Is the social stuff. I don't like doing it. I just don't. As I like doing, like the events I like doing are like historic events, you know, reenactments or education. I love doing education. I love doing classes. Classes are awesome. I'll do classes. That's fantastic. So as far as sitting at a table and pouring or shaking hands and meet and greet, it's not really my thing. So what is your preference for barrel entry proof of both brandy and whiskey? Well, so I like low barrel entry proof on whiskey. And the reason for that is that my methodology of whiskey production is a blend and balance. I want 50% raw material as it was in the field with alongside fermentation and distillation, and I want 50% maturation, not aging, maturation. Water is a better solvent on wood than ethanol is, and since I'm trying to go at 50-50 on that sort of thing, I tend to want more water, well, more water than you typically would get. So I'll drop from 135 to 105. Low barrel entry proof. That's what they did back before Prohibition most often, because they were selling the entire barrel, and they wanted that barrel when it was mature to be as close to 100 proof as possible, so that way you're not adding a bunch of water to it that didn't age alongside it and essentially diluting all of those ingredients. On brandy, I'm a little bit different. I want to hold on to more of the brandy flavor, more of the apple flavor. I still want to blend and balance, but let's call it 60-40. 40 barrel, 60 brandy, right? Because if you don't go that direction, you start losing the aroma. So I tend to go in at higher proofs there. So I go in at 135 in general, or better, whatever still proof is. Whatever comes off the doubling still at, that's what it's going in the barrel at for brandy in particular, because that alcohol is more stable at that proof. It doesn't micro-oxidize as fastly, but it also doesn't volatilize as fastly, and it doesn't tend to over extract the oak from the barrel and then overrun all that nice brandy aroma and flavor, versus with the whiskey I want that micro oxidization and I want that wood flavor in there, if that makes sense to you. We'll do one more here and we'll wrap it up because we're 13 minutes in. So, and I'll finish these up in another video. So Rick, on their side or pallet, vertical stacking storage for barrels. How drastically does this affect the aging process? Dude, always ricks and or wine racks, always on their side, liquid always in contact with both heads. This drastically affects the flavor profile, majorly in a 53-gallon barrel. I hate pallet stacking. It is a waste of a perfectly great toasted head on one end of the barrel. The barrels also dry out much worse and have bad leaks when you lay them over on their side when they dry out on one head, for sure. You will never catch me putting barrels on a pallet like that, ever. I did it one time because I had to at Copper and Kings, and I hated the idea then, and I hate it even worse now, and I don't want anything to do with it. Think about it. So typically the barrel itself is charred, and then the heads are toasted. Well, we've talked about this before. It's actually the toast under the char on the main part of the barrel that gives you the vast majority of your flavors and your wood sugars, right? The char's there is a filtration device. So those heads are pure flavor. Well, now you're only in contact with one of those heads. You've lost that flavor. And you can't even justify the labor of pulling the pallets down after however many months and then flipping the barrels over and putting them back on. Not to mention the fact that you're going to dry those heads out on the side that's up in the air, and when you do flip those barrels, they're going to leak like a sieve. So pallets or barrel racks, or not pallets, but ricks or barrel racks. When it comes to ricks or barrel racks, I'll take barrel racks every time, and I'll tell you why. They're easy to move, they don't break, they don't drop barrels, Unless somebody's being an idiot, they don't drop barrels anyways. And I don't have to clock barrels as far as rolling them into the ricks. I don't have to crawl underneath other barrels that are up above me waiting to fall on my head. I don't have to worry about catching my fingers in between the barrel and the actual boards or the struts on the ricks themselves. And if you talk to anybody who's moved barrels for very long in this industry, you'll notice that almost all of them are missing a piece of a finger. And they all talk like Vietnam veterans too. Like, I remember when that happened back in '89. I like my fingers. I like to play guitar. I'm gonna keep them if I can. So it's also nice with the barrel racks too, that you can move them further apart and space them out a little better and get more airflow to them. So, all right, man, I will get back to the rest of these questions here shortly. Later.